In a quiet corner of the kingdom of Sendaria, a young boy named Garion lived an ordinary life on Faldor's farm. He knew nothing of his parents, raised instead by his Aunt Paul, a formidable cook whose presence commanded respect and whose sharp tongue could wither a man at 20 paces. Yet sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, strange things happened around her. A pot would move itself to the stove, flames would leap higher without being stoked, or wounds would heal impossibly fast. That comfortable world ended the day an old storyteller named Mr. Wolf arrived. With his twinkling blue eyes and endless tales of distant lands, Wolf seemed like just another wandering vagabond. But Garion noticed something unusual, the way Aunt Paul and this old man spoke to each other, as if they'd known each other for centuries. Then everything changed. Something ancient and powerful had been stolen. The Orb of Aldur, a jewel that had helped shape the world itself. When Wolf announced he must leave to track the thief, both he and Aunt Paul insisted Garion come along. He had no choice but to leave the only home he'd ever known. As they traveled across kingdoms, Garion began to understand that nothing was as it seemed. Mr. Wolf was actually Belgarath, an eternal sorcerer 7,000 years old and disciple of the god Aldur himself. And Aunt Paul was Polgara, his daughter and a sorceress of immense power who had spent years guarding Garion in secret. Magic was real. The gods were real. Prophecy moved through the world like an invisible current. And somehow, Garion was central to everything happening.
Their company grew as they journeyed. There was Silk, the clever spy, whose wit was as sharp as his daggers. Barak, the massive warrior who could transform into a bear-like creature in moments of danger. Hetar, the grim horse lord whose hatred of their enemies burned cold and deep. Mandoralin, the perfect knight with unshakable courage. And Dernik, the honest blacksmith whose practical wisdom saved them time and again. Together, they became more than companions. They became a family, bound by friendship and loyalty. The thief they pursued was Zidar, who had stolen the orb and delivered it to Torak, the dark god who had been burned and maimed by the orb when he tried to use it to dominate the world 3,000 years ago. Torak had cracked the world in half, killing millions, before the orb punished him and left him in a death-like sleep. Now he was awakening, and prophecy foretold a final confrontation between Torak and a child of light who would determine the fate of the world. Garion discovered something that shook him. 2 prophecies existed, one serving light and one serving darkness, both manipulating events across thousands of years. And he was at the center of it all, the ultimate champion of the light. The journey took them through treacherous lands, the political intrigues of Tolnedra, the poison-filled forests of Nyissa, the vast grasslands of Algaria, and always southward, toward the dark lands of the Ungaraks who worshipped Torak. With each mile, Garion changed. The innocent farm boy faded, replaced by someone harder, more aware. He discovered he had sorcery within him, the same power Belgarath and Polgara wielded. His first attempts were frightening, the raw energy responding to his will in ways he couldn't control. But he learned the fundamental truth, the will and the word. All it required was absolute focus and a single word to reshape reality itself. The greatest changes weren't just about magic. Garion fell in love with Senedra, the tiny, tempestuous imperial princess, who both infuriated and captivated him. She was spoiled and stubborn, but also impossibly brave and fiercely intelligent. Their relationship was a constant battlefield. Yet beneath the fighting, something deep and true was growing. A love neither could deny. Garion also learned the truth about himself. He was the last in a bloodline that stretched back thousands of years, descended from the ancient Riven king who had fought Torak before, and he was destined to face Torak again. The farm boy was meant to fight a god. The weight of this knowledge nearly crushed him. How could he possibly stand against divine power? Yet the prophecy had chosen him before he was born. As they recovered the orb, Torak stirred from his sleep. The Angarax mobilized vast armies, driven by religious fanaticism. War was coming between light and dark themselves. Senedra revealed her own crucial role. She would raise the armies of the West. In a stunning transformation, the spoiled princess became a warrior queen, rallying nations with speeches that brought hardened warriors to tears. She became the symbol of everything they fought for. While Senedra led armies, Garion prepared for his destiny. The orb had recognized him, singing to him with cold blue light. It was aware, with its own will and purpose, and it had chosen him. The sword of the Riven King was forged, and with the orb mounted in its pommel, it became a weapon of devastating power. Yet, even with all this, Garion knew it might not be enough against a god who had lived since the beginning of time. The confrontation came at the place which is no more, in the dead city where Torak had slept for 3,000 years. Outside, armies clashed in chaos, men dying by thousands as prophecy played out through blood and steel. Everything came down to one meeting between a farm boy and a dark god. Torak stood before Garion, terrible and magnificent. Half his face was destroyed, melted by the orb's power, a constantly weeping wound. But his remaining eye burned with fury and absolute certainty that he would triumph. The battle transcended mortal comprehension, two beings channeling forces that could unmake reality itself. The orb blazed like a star, the ground cracked, the air screamed. But Garion had something Torak never expected. The dark god had always been alone, believing power was supreme. Garion fought with the strength of all those he loved. Polgara's protection, Belgarath's wisdom, his companion's loyalty, and Senedra's indomitable spirit. He fought not for power, but for love and freedom. In the end, it wasn't power that triumphed, but a simple question. When Garion demanded to know why Torak had done all this, the dark god revealed the terrible truth. He was lonely. For all his power and divinity, Torak was utterly, cosmically alone, desperate to be loved, but capable only of demanding worship. Confronted with that emptiness, the dark god was destroyed not by sword or sorcery, but by his own inability to bear his isolation. With Torak's fall, the prophecy was complete. The 3,000-year threat was ended, but victory had a price. Lives were lost, scars earned that would never fully heal. Nothing would ever be the same. Garion was now king of Riva, heir to ancient thrones, bearing responsibilities he'd never wanted. But he had Senedra beside him, his queen, his partner, his equal, Together they would face whatever came. The companions who had journeyed together began to part, each returning to their own lands. Yet they carried bonds forged in adventure, friendships that would endure. They had changed the world, and the world had changed them into legends. Standing in the throne room, with the orb blazing overhead and Sinedra's hand in his, Garion understood something fundamental. Destiny wasn't a chain, but a path illuminated before him. The prophecy had guided him, but every choice was his own. Those choices, to love, to protect, to stand against darkness, to remain true to himself, made all the difference. They transformed a reluctant farm boy into a king through the person he chose to become. The story that began with morning chores and kitchen lessons had become legend. But for Garion, it would always be about the journey itself, the friends who walked beside him, and the truth that even the humblest beginning could lead to extraordinary destiny when you have the courage to take that first step into the unknown.